Star Wars fans were understandably bummed when Lucasfilm announced they'd be jettisoning the saga's expanded universe in favor of a fresh start. But that hasn't stopped the new trilogy from teasing certain connections, and the similarities between Darth Revan and Kylo Ren are too abundant not to notice. There's a strong possibility the trajectory of Revan's character arc might provide us some major clues as to where Kylo Ren will end up in Episode 9. Don't believe us? Prepare to have your minds blown, viewers. And before we get into how Darth Revan could redeem Kylo Ren, go ahead and redeem the lack of great content in your life by clicking that subscribe button. We promise you won't regret it. Let's go back in time to the days when all we knew about Episode 7 was that it was going to be called Episode 7. There was no awakening of the Force yet. No Rey, no Finn, no BB-8, or Kylo Ren. This was the prime time for fan theorizing and debates. How would this long-awaited sequel tie into the sprawling, overarching expanded universe, which spanned novels, television shows, and video games? Turns out, it wouldn't. Early on, J.J. Abrams and Lucasfilm made it clear that Episode 7 would be a fresh start, not bogged down in the expansive mythology that had developed outside the realm of the main film series. But then we got that first batch of news revealing the film's title and its new cast of characters, and fans noticed a striking resemblance between the trilogy's Vader-inspired villain Kylo Ren and a certain well-known character of Star Wars lore. That character was none other than Darth Revan. I mean, it's not much of a stretch. Look at them, they're practically twinsies. Wait, hold up, back up a second. What's that you say? You don't know who Darth Revan is? Are you kidding me right now? You call yourself a Star Wars fan and you've never played Knights of the Old Republic? I can't even. It's a good thing I'm sitting down. It's okay, we're good. We can get through this together and we'll emerge on the other side all the stronger. You ready? Let's do this. So, Knights of the Old Republic is a 2003 video game created by BioWare, the famous game developer that would go on to create the popular and beloved Mass Effect series. It also happens to be one of the best video games ever made, and arguably one of the best Star Wars games, if not the best. Seriously, you've got to check it out if you haven't already. It's just so good. You also might want to beware because we're about to spoil just about everything. So don't come a-crying to us after the video saying, "How could you do this to me? I was going to play it eventually." You've had 15 years to play it. The only person you have to blame is yourself. Let's get back to it. Knights of the Old Republic takes place thousands of years before the events of the original Star Wars trilogy and the prequels during a time when the Jedi Order was thriving. Revan was a prominent member of the Order, but he ended up getting a little high and mighty and decided to lead the Old Republic into battle during the Mandalorian Wars. This was a big no-no for the Jedi Council, which had explicitly ordered Revan not to do it. The experience would darken Revan's soul, making him a ruthless leader who ended up embracing the dark side of the Force. Bummer. Once the war had ended, Revan, along with his apprentice Malak, sought out the legendary Sith Empire, led by the sinister Vitiate. This Vitiate guy was a total jerk, and he ended up corrupting both Revan and Malak with his sneaky mind control abilities, making them Sith Lords. He sent them off on a quest to discover something called the Star Forge, an ancient shipyard with a massive, unstoppable fleet. Instead of being obedient little Siths, Revan and Malak were like, "Psh, forget this. We're gonna form our own super-duper evil Sith club." And that's exactly what they did. Their first goal was to take on the Republic and the Jedi in the hopes that they'd gain control of both. Then, with their powers combined, and we totally mean that in a Captain Planet kind of way, they'd enact their vengeance on Vitiate and his Sith forces. Naturally, this didn't go according to plan. While Revan and Malak's forces did manage to wreak all manner of unholy havoc, the Jedi ended up gaining the upper hand because, well, they're Jedi. That's just what they do. They take Revan down, but instead of killing him, they wipe his memory and stow him on a random Republic ship to join the ranks as another nameless soldier. But the Force works in mysterious ways. Even though he no longer had his memory, Revan ends up finding his way back to the Jedi Order and training as a Jedi. When he eventually regains his memories, he rejects his past self, defeats his former ally Malak, and lives happily ever after with his hip and happening Jedi wife. That's it. Story over. Or was it? Look, we'd like to tell you Revan did live happily ever after, but it's just not true. What really ended up happening was he decided to hunt down Vitiate and take him out. Instead, Revan ended up getting captured and tortured, and his light and dark sides were split down the middle. While he did manage to escape to a place called the Foundry, where he pursued a new plan involving building droid armies to take down the Emperor, it didn't exactly pan out for him. He ended up defeated, giving himself up to the Force, or his light side at least. His dark side got the short end of the stick, clinging to Revan's physical body until it got the chance to take Vitiate out once and for all. The good news is his light and dark side ended up reconciling, and Revan finally got to become one with the Force. Isn't that just the sweetest? So what about our boy Kylo Ren? Well, if you'll recall, there were many fans that thought Kylo Ren was Darth Revan, and the two characters' striking physical similarities provided solid evidence to support this. While Abrams and Kathleen Kennedy had made it clear they were jettisoning any connection to the expanded universe, some folks thought this might be a bluff to throw fans off. Turns out all the secrecy surrounding the character was due to Kylo Ren actually being Han and Leia's son, Ben Solo. Still, the new Star Wars trilogy has hinted that not everything from the expanded universe was retconned, teasing fans with bits of information here and there, such as the revamped story of Grand Admiral Thrawn. Is it so hard to believe the story of Revan and Malak still exists in this universe since it takes place in such a distant past? And if that's the case, isn't it feasible Kylo Ren would be well versed in the history of the Jedi Civil War? It seems like he would have been a studious, scholarly young lad, between all the random bouts of rage and yelling and crying and moping. Look at the Mandalorian Wars, for instance. Those have been reintroduced into this new canon, right? So isn't it entirely possible that when Luke was training Ben as his apprentice and they were searching the galaxy for any sign of the ancient Jedi Order and related artifacts, Luke regaled young Solo with tales of this major event, as well as the details of Revan and Malak's attempts to conquer both the Jedi and the Sith? The connection between Knights of the Old Republic and the new trilogy becomes even stronger with Rian Johnson's offering The Last Jedi. Let's take a look at our handy-dandy Last Jedi visual dictionary, shall we? This object is known as a Jedi Crusader pendant. And what are Jedi Crusaders, you ask? Those just happen to be the names of the Jedi that joined Revan's cause during the Mandalorian Wars. Is your mind blown yet? Cause we're not even finished. Kylo Ren's lightsaber is further evidence that there's a solid connection to be made between Knights of the Old Republic and the new trilogy. The lightsaber's crossguard design is, according to the visual dictionary, something that exists in the canon Star Wars universe. Specifically, this design was seen during something called the Scourge of Malachor. Knights of the Old Republic 2 makes reference to an event that took place during the Jedi Civil War, and sounds suspiciously similar to this. In Knights of the Old Republic 2, Revan ended up using a massive weapon known as the Mass Shadow Generator, which successfully ended the war by wiping out not only his enemy's army, but his own army as well. And where did he use this weapon? On the planet Malachor 5. Scourge of Malachor? Malachor 5? Is this all starting to make sense now? Now, let's take a step back and look at Kylo Ren. His trajectory up to this point has been remarkably similar to Darth Revan's, to the point where it's entirely possible he may have studied Revan's history and had it somewhere in the back of his mind as he's plotted his own way. Sure, it's been well established that Kylo Ren practically worships his granddaddy Darth Vader. Wow, it's still so weird to think of Vader as a grandfather. I mean, I know it's technically accurate, but I just can't picture Vader bouncing Kylo Ren on his knee and sending him a $25 space check for his birthday every year. Anyway, back to the point. Kylo Ren has modeled his life after Vader's, but there are striking similarities to Revan as well. In The Last Jedi, Kylo Ren determines that both the Jedi Order and the Sith are antiquated and not worth following. He was failed by both of them and decides they're overrated, asking Rey to join him on his quest to pave a new path, separate from the wills of both the Jedi and the Sith. While Vader was a slave to the dark side of the Force, willingly serving the Emperor, Kylo Ren seems set on not subscribing to any established ideology. He wants to establish his own identity. This is a key difference between him and Vader. In fact, it places him closer to Revan's mindset. For crying out loud, the guy even formed the Knights of Ren, which was basically his version of the Jedi Crusaders. This is all to suggest that if Episode 9 pulls out all the stops and decides to reintroduce Revan and the events of Knights of the Old Republic as canon, well, let's just say you heard it here on ScreenRant first, folks. So now that we've gone through all the similarities Kylo Ren and Revan share, let's take a look at exactly how Revan could pave the way for Kylo Ren's redemption in Episode 9. The Last Jedi ends with Kylo Ren killing Supreme Leader Snoke and taking charge of the First Order. Now that he has control of this massive army and fleet, we expect him to continue his quest to wipe out both the Jedi Order and the Sith, establishing a new republic in the process. But while he seems to have embraced his dark side, Kylo Ren's conversations with Rey have made it all too clear that he's struggling with the decision, that there still may be some good left in him, despite the horrible things that he's done. His struggle is similar to Vader's and Luke's, in that everything in the first Star Wars saga has come down to a choice between the light and the dark. And if Episode 9 is intended to wrap up this entire Skywalker story in grand fashion, it makes sense for the duality that has played such a major part in these films to play a major part in this final chapter of the story. This splitting symbolism is peppered throughout Episode 8. I mean, not only does Kylo Ren literally split Supreme Leader Snoke in half in what is easily one of the coolest scenes in all of Star Wars, he follows it up by splitting Luke's lightsaber in half during his struggle with Rey. Even the Supremacy, the giant First Order flagship, is split in half. Are you getting the picture yet? Duality is key here. The specific connection to Revan shows itself when we take a look at Snoke's mention that Kylo Ren's killing Han Solo split his spirit to the bone, referencing Revan's spirit splitting in Knights of the Old Republic. Since there seems to be a difference between the light versions of one's spirit and the dark version of one's spirit, it's possible Revan's ultimate demise could play out in similar fashion in Kylo's ultimate destiny. Perhaps he'll embrace his darker tendencies, which will manifest in his physical body and actions. But his light self, his spiritual self, will struggle within. Ultimately, Rey may need to kill Kylo Ren's physical body in order to set his spirit free. Are we stretching a bit, trying to make the connection to Revan? Of course we are! That's the whole point of theorizing after all. And sure, it might not be feasible that Lucasfilm would spontaneously decide that Knights of the Old Republic is canon again, but the similarities between Kylo Ren and Revan are evident. We're willing to bet Kylo Ren's ultimate trajectory might not be so dissimilar from Revan's after all. Now that we've run through all of this, do you think there's a chance Episode 9 will reintroduce Knights of the Old Republic and Darth Revan to the canon? Did all this talk of Revan and Malak make you want to revisit the classic video game? Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to ScreenRant.